you for that generous introduction, Krish. And yes, Lord Ramawan will tell you that he first met me when he was an intern at the United Nations, and I was this Under-Secretary General addressing the youngsters. So you can see that one of us has matured, and the other one is still so
Looking the same. Yeah, I didn't have grey hair then.
But anyway, wonderful to be with you all. I've had the opportunity to address different groups of people in the Houses of Parliament over the years, but it's always satisfying to see such a full House and such a large attendance, and great respect to the Lords and MPs here. Wonderful to see an even broader constituency of, I gather, academics, journalists and others. I want to stress that I'm not here in any official business. I'm not here on any commission from the government. I am a member of the opposition, and I chair the Committee on External Relations, the equivalent of your Foreign Relations Committee, because in our system, 8 of the 24 standing committees of Parliament are chaired by opposition MPs. Our committees always include both houses. So I'm from the lower house. I'm now in my 4th term, but I chair the Foreign Affairs Committee. So since I was in London, and I had been in Oxford and Cambridge making a few speeches and even spoke at the Inner Temple on Friday, Friday. And Saturday I was in Bradford at the Literature Festival there, speaking in something called the Doha Debate. But then since then I've been wandering around London a little bit, talking to editorial boards of newspapers, which had asked to see me in Financial Times, The Economist, Bloomberg, and seeing a lot of my fellow MPs, but on your side of the divide. So, saw the President of the Conservative Friends of India, your former Deputy Prime Minister, Ahmed Dowden, yesterday, met Tom Tugendhat, who used to be my counterpart as Chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, met my current counterpart, Dave Emily Thornbury, this afternoon. Have seen a few other MPs for fairly candid conversations about aspects that we could probably cover in this conversation, though I gather we're on the record, and there may be some things I'll have to be a little circumspect about, but for the most part, I'm notorious for my candor, and I hope to live up to my reputation. Having said all of this, let me just say that my conversations have inevitably centered, and with members of Parliament, have centered largely on 2 subjects. One has been, of course, broadly India-UK relations, and the other has been the recent developments in the subcontinent, involving in particular our 88-hour conflict with Pakistan following the terrorist attack in Pahalgam. I thought I might say a few words briefly about both, not in any great detail. I follow the Elon Musk principle. As Elon Musk says to his friends, I shall not keep you long. But having said that, what I'm going to do is to try and say a few things to plant the seeds of future conversation, and then really open it up to you. And I think as long as Lord Raval doesn't have to go and vote, he will moderate the conversation. And I believe Kanishka Narayan will come and help him do that when he's voted in the House. And yes, you've got votes coming up, I realize that. But anyway, it's been wonderful to interact with all of you on whatever issues are of interest. Now, on the first subject, I think I'm not wrong in saying that we probably have reached an important turning point for the better in India-UK relations. There had been a bit of a trough, perhaps even slightly worse than a trough for some years, characterized by various things, including some sense of unfairness about the conditions under which Indian students, for example, came here. We saw a plummeting of the number of Indian students. They were allowed to work, I think, 2 months after graduation. The Chinese were getting 2 years or 5 years. All of that became sources of discord and unhappiness. And I'm delighted that now a series of agreements have been reached, culminating in the free trade agreement that was agreed last month, which I think really will usher in a new dawn. We're hearing of a tremendous increase in bilateral trade, many more opportunities for mutual investment, and possibly new areas of cooperation. For the first time in a very long time, there's serious talk about defense cooperation. There is, of course, going to be a major uptick in things like Indians drinking lots of cheaper single malt Scotch whiskey, and also perhaps buying some of your aerospace products and automobiles and so on. And we in turn are pleased that not only has there been a certain constructive attitude towards Indian students coming here and staying on to gain some work experience and so on, but there's also now the New Young Professionals Program under which the Lords have to go and vote.
Yes. We need to go and vote, but I'm so grateful. Kanishka, are you coming to take over? You're going to finish.
Another division.
We'll come back. Democracy has to function. So
Democracy must be functioning.
moderate. Right. Thank you. So sorry.
No, of course.
There you go. British democracy at its best. Yes.
Just as when I was saying things, I was looking up. Inside UK political class advantage. But having said that, I mean, it really is, to my mind, a very, very old set of indicators. The New Young Professionals Program, if it ever really fulfills its potential, will see Indian professionals here and British professionals in India spending a couple of years in each country, which I think is not only going to be of value to them in the short term, but also cement bonds between the two countries in the long term, because there'll be so many more people with direct first-hand experience with each other. Things are looking very, very promising. Indeed, we can talk about some of these things in more detail if you wish. Having said that, on the other topic which has been agitating people, what happened in the subcontinent following the terror attack in Pahalgam, Kashmir, on the 22nd of April, when 26 holidaymakers, civilians for the most part, who happened to be on holiday in a rather tranquil meadow in a remote part of Kashmir, north of the hill station of Pahalgam, were gunned down in cold blood, and were gunned down rather ruthlessly and in a very cynical, carefully planned and well-crafted operation in which the terrorists came dressed in army uniforms, went from individual holidaymaker to individual holidaymaker, asking them what their religion was. When people answered Hindu, they were promptly shot between the eyes. When people refused to answer, they were asked to recite the Kalima, which those who couldn't do were then proceeded to be shot, and some others had their trousers pulled down to identify them circumcised. When one distraught wife screamed, "Kill me too," the killer said, "No, go back and tell Modi, go back and tell the Indians." So it was very, very much a nasty, malicious, evil slaughter, intended not just to obviously take 26 lives, but also to destroy the extraordinary boom that had been in tourism to Kashmir, and the thriving Kashmiri economy would take a setback, so that might perhaps help increase or create alienation amongst the local populace. And then the hope very clearly from the manner of these executions was that there would be a backlash in the rest of India to the killings on religious grounds, and that perhaps Hindus would go around saying, well, since these people killed us because we're Hindu, we're going to kill Muslims in revenge, which fortunately didn't happen. Indians stayed united, condemned the horror unitedly, and India rose up as one to signal to the government that we must react to terrorism. I myself, as an opposition MP, wrote an op-ed in one of India's leading newspapers, the Express, which was headlined, "Hit hard, hit smart." It was clear that what the experts call a kinetic action was going to be necessary, that there would have to be a physical response, simply because we tried everything else for 37 years and nothing had worked. The Pakistanis turned terrorists against us the moment the Soviets pulled out of Afghanistan. There were lots of unemployed young men with beards and Kalashnikovs who could be channeled in certain directions, and there were people turned against India, particularly in Kashmir, and people turned against Afghanistan. As you know, by 1995, Afghanistan had fallen to the Taliban, which was a wholly owned creation of the Pakistani Inter-Services Intelligence, the ISI, and the people of Kashmir suffered horrendous loss of lives in violence caused by terrorists throughout the 90s and into the early years of the century. Many of you will remember the horrors of Mumbai, 26/11/2008, when 270 innocent people were killed. But in an operation which Pakistan denied having anything to do with, until one of the terrorists was captured alive, and not only was he identified, his home address, where he lived, what his name was, who he was trained by, and where he was trained, everything came out until that denial was no longer credible. In any case, Western intelligence agencies also recorded the chilling voice of the Pakistani handler giving minute-by-minute instructions to the killers in Mumbai to move from room to room, killing people, because he was watching Indian television and telling them what to do. This horror resulted in a joint international effort to investigate, to compile a dossier which was given to the Pakistanis, and to this day, 17 years later, no one has been prosecuted, no one has been punished in Pakistan. The same evidence used by the Americans inculpated two Pakistani or people of Pakistani origin in America who have been convicted since, one of whom has been extradited to India thereafter. But the fact is that the same evidence did not lead to any prosecution in Pakistan. So that didn't work. The second thing that the Pakistanis are calling for, since the international investigation has been discredited, is a joint investigation. Well, that's been tried too. In 2015, when the Pakistanis attacked Pathankot in India, the Pathankot airbase, our Prime Minister, who just made an impromptu and very affectionate visit to his Pakistani counterpart, whose birth date was on December 25 the previous year, and whose granddaughter's wedding he'd attended, he called the Prime Minister and said, surely you had nothing to do with this, why didn't you join the investigation? And so Pakistani intelligence showed up as an Indian airbase, much to the horror of Indian intelligence, and then went back to Pakistan and said, oh, the Indians did it to themselves, which, as you can imagine, led to a terrible sense of betrayal in India and a conviction on the part of the government that the Pakistanis were not serious about dealing with the terrorism emanating from their territory, and other solutions would have to be found. This is what led to a succession of more decisive actions, surgical strikes across the border, a terrorist attack in 2019 that led to an air attack on a terrorist base in a place called Balakot in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. And then finally, this decision to react to this particular attack with something more. And that something more was an air raid missile raid on 9 known terrorist camps. Now, the government of India took pains to signal both to the Pakistanis and to the world. They told the Pakistanis and they announced to the world that this was very carefully calibrated. So it was not just hit hard, it was hit smart, as I wanted them to. That they had only hit bases of well-known terrorist organizations listed by the United Nations Terrorism Committee and also on the State Department US Wanted Terrorist list. And that they had taken care not to hit any Pakistan government sites or any Pakistan military sites in that first strike on the 6th and 7th of May. And they told the Pakistanis, if you leave well enough alone, we're done. But if you hit, we will hit you back. And that's exactly what transpired. They hit, and rather indiscriminately, they killed some nuns at the Carmelites convent in Poonch in Srinagar. They hit a Sikh Gurudwara, killing a number of Sikh worshippers. And they hit civilians in their homes and on the streets. India then retaliated, not quite in kind. We didn't target the civilians, but we did hit military targets, which we had eschewed on the first day. And on the night of the 9th, 10th, we successfully damaged 11 Pakistani air bases, which, again, the photographs are available on commercial, publicly available satellite television, showing the extent of damage that was caused. Pakistan the next morning called it and said they'd like to call it off. And we said, we've been saying all along, if you hit, we hit, if you stop, we stop. If you want to stop, we'll stop. And that was that. That was the end of the war. So I stress a couple of things in this narrative. The first is that there was no need for anyone to persuade us to stop, because from the very beginning, we had signaled a desire to stop at the first opportunity. Second, there was no need to sort of call for mediation or whatever, because the notion of mediation implies equivalence, and there can be no equivalence between terrorists and their innocent civilian victims, and there can be no equivalence between a state that harbors, incubates terrorism, and a state exercising its right of self-defense, which is why India was simply not inclined to indulge in any talk of mediation. I led one of the delegations that the government sent, 7 delegations, all multi-party. My own delegation had 8 people, of whom we represented 5 political parties, 8 states, and 3 different religions, and that was very much the intention was to convey very clearly that India was united, that across these very many visible diversities, we were one in standing up against terrorism. At the same time, we wanted to get away from this narrative that, oh, it's the Indians and Pakistanis doing it to each other all the time. Sorry, this is not about any state conflict. India is not interested in conflict with Pakistan. We are focused on our development, on our growth, on our technology, on the transformation and the well-being of our people. We do not wish to be distracted by conflict with anybody. And we're very happy to leave the Pakistanis alone if they will leave us alone. The problem is they are not content to leave us alone. They are what's called a revisionist power. They want to change the arrangements on the subcontinent, and they want to make sure that the strategy minuted by a Pakistani general way back in the 1980s and since made public of bleeding India to death by 1,000 cuts, that particular strategy would continue to be followed. And therefore, I'm afraid we've been confronting this for 36 years with mounting levels of exasperation. I know that Pakistan also sent a couple of delegations out. Young Bilal Bhutto, whom I've met, is a very pleasant young man, essentially seemed to have made 2 major points. First, we didn't do this. The Indians made an unprovoked attack. I think I've given you enough reasons to indicate why we believe there was no doubt who had done it, but there was also one further detail which I haven't mentioned. Within 45 minutes of the terror attack, before it was public knowledge, before it was in any news, because there were no journalists around when the killings happened, within 45 minutes, credit had been claimed by a group called the Resistance Front, which is a well-known proxy for the Lashkar-e-Taiba based in Pakistan, in a place called Muridke, and the Resistance Front not only made that claim, but went on to reiterate that claim 24 hours later on their official website. So there is no doubt the Resistance Front is a group we had been complaining about to the UN Terrorism Committee in 2023 and 2024, so it's not exactly an unknown entity. So that was another major reason. And then, of course, our intelligence people are no fools. They collated the CCTV footage and identified at least 3 of the perpetrators, 2 of whom, by photographs, they were able to identify the names of them because they've been involved in previous terror attacks, were indeed Pakistanis. One was a Kashmiri who had been known to have exfiltrated the language the police like to use into Pakistan for training, and who had clearly been sent back to do this dirty deed. So I want to show you, number one, that India is a responsible state that wouldn't have done this without being 100% certain that it knew what it was responding to, but equally that it did so in a very measured way and only targeting terror sites. The second argument that the Pakistani delegations have been using is, we're also victims of terrorism, and poor Bilal says, I lost my mother to terrorism as well. And I feel deeply sorry for the young man. He should not have had to lose his mother to terrorism. But we didn't create that problem. That problem was created in and by some of the very elements on whose behalf he's speaking now. The Pakistani ISI that created these terror groups to serve the purposes of their policy towards Afghanistan and towards India. They are the ones who have based, trained, armed, financed, equipped, and deployed these terrorists for 37 years. So it's a bit much, I'm afraid. It's very sad, but at the same time, it's as Hillary Clinton rather memorably said a dozen years ago when she was Secretary of State to the Pakistanis, you cannot breed a nest of vipers in your backyard and expect them only to bite your neighbors. So unfortunately, the old story of Dr. Frankenstein, build a monster that escapes your control, one faction of these radicalized Islamist fanatics decided Pakistan itself wasn't Islamist enough for their taste and turned against the the ruling establishment there, and that's why some of these killings in Pakistan have been happening. So we sympathize, but we obviously would ask you to look at where the problem originated. So I'll stop there just to give you broadly the contours of these two issues. I'm very happy to take questions, comments, pushback, reactions, issue clarifications, whatever you like about everything. Chris.
Thank you so much. Please. What we'll do, if we may, is hear from the audience. We've only got 50 minutes or so together before the next engagement that Dr. Tharoor has. So if I can encourage people to keep questions, keep it to questions rather than statements, and keep them as short as possible. Before that, I do want to just say a huge thank you to the 1928 Institute, which has curated this event, one of many events of real top quality that they do. They are the descendants of the Indian League, which your father...
No, my father wasn't old enough for that. It was founded by a man called B.K. Krishnamenon.
Yes.
But my father subsequently helped Krishnamenon to found something called the India Club, which sadly died last year, which was on the Strand, where, you know, impecunious Indians, especially Indian journalists, were able to get a cheap Indian meal and beer in the Strand from 1949 thereabouts till last year.
And
it's been taken up for redevelopment now in India.
We know, we were there on the last night. So there you go. So a huge thank you to 1928 Institute. I'm an advisor, but I really haven't seen anything like it in Britain. So long may this continue. Right, so questions. Please tell us who you are and what you do. Gentleman there, put his hand up first, so please.
Good evening, Dr. Tharoor. My name is Vinod. I'm a Kashmiri Pandit, and I also run the APPG for British Hindus.
You also run the?
APPG for British Hindus, from a secretariat point of view.
Wonderful.
Right? So this topic about Pahalgam is very close to me.
Right.
Having been born in Kashmir and having seen the whole 80s and the 90s. My question to you is, has General Munir dealt a blow to the promise that India and Modi made post-revocation of Article 317? And is now basically going to take Kashmir back 20, 30 years. And the linked question is, what does it mean for the rehabilitation of pundits?
So
What does it mean for the rehabilitation of pundits?
You know, the rehabilitation of pundits.
Yeah.
So can we have a couple more, and then you can handle them as a group?
Dr. Tharoor, very eloquent as usual. My name is Ajay Yadav. My question to you really is, why doesn't India adopt the first strike policy like Israelis do? If you know where they are, you know what the intention is, why wait?
So I know that Lord Seeker wants to ask a question. Could you hold on for a sec? I'll ask for you. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Hello, nice to see you again. Resham Kotecha, Director of the Conservative Friends of India. Do you see peace with Pakistan in our lifetime, and how does the influence of China complicate or influence that peace and the likelihood of that happening?
Okay, so I'll take them in that order if I may. Kashmiri Pandits, I not just sympathize, I empathize. I was married to a Kashmiri Pandit. My late wife, her own family was displaced in 89 to 91 when there were these threats against Kashmiri families by the terrorists, and the government and the police were unable to extend protection to every family in these villages. And I have visited her ancestral home and seen the ruins. It really is a very sad situation in Kashmir, going back precisely to the time that I mentioned when the Mujahideen, freed from the Soviets having departed from Afghanistan, turned their attention to India. So there is a genuine problem because a large number of Kashmiri Pandits were scattered in places in the state but outside the Kashmir Valley, which was their ancestral lands. A large number are settled in Jammu now, and some remain in essentially refugee camps, Israeli camps for internally displaced persons. There are many who've simply gone off and made their lives in other parts of India or abroad, as you have done, and who ultimately no longer nurture a hope of going back. But we have insisted on the principle that those who want to go back should have the right to go back. And indeed, I might add that many Kashmiri Muslims are of the view that their state is impoverished without this large presence of Kashmiri Pandits. I accompanied my late father-in-law to the Hazratbal Mosque to visit as a tourist, and many came up to him and said, "We want you back. The place is not the same without you." There is a certain sense within Kashmir, across religious divides, that people need to be together again. I think that's certainly the view of the people in power today, but there's understandably a lot of hesitation on the part of Kashmiri Pandits to risk going back, as long as every time there seems to be a lull and normalcy, something like this happens, as Pelgam did, and then they hesitate. So the principle remains, they have a right to return to their homelands, and very often, in fact, their own homes, which have now been demolished, but the land is theirs and they can rebuild it if it's safe enough to do so. But many of them don't feel it. There are some Kashmiri Pandits who remain. Now, I don't know if you know Professor Amitabh Mattu, for example, his mother, who was a teacher, chose to stay on there. It's the people like that who have never left the valley, never left Srinagar, but they are a very minuscule minority, sorry to say. But the answer remains, there can be no grand plan for them until they feel safe enough to participate in a plan of resettlement and return. The second question was on Israel.
Yeah.
And the answer very simply is that India, as I said, doesn't want to be seen as instigating a conflict. I mean, we really are the land of Mahatma Gandhi. We're striking that every delegation that went abroad, in every country in the world, there is somewhere or the other a bust or a statue of Mahatma Gandhi. And we made it a point to pay floral tribute to the great man, because, we want the world to understand we didn't start this problem and we have no intention of starting a conflict. It's a pity that the Pakistanis will not be well enough known. And if they do something, we're not going to turn the other cheek. I remember making a speech saying that, Mahatma Gandhi did, after all, use nonviolence to overcome colonial oppression. So he would not have wanted us to live in fear or live in subjugation or live in terror. And he would have wanted us to stand up against that. But ultimately our instinct is one of peace. I think it's extremely unlikely that even the present Indian government, which prides itself on being a tough government, I don't think even they will initiate a first strike action against Pakistan. But by doing what they did at the beginning of what we call Operation Sindhu, they did signal we know where you are. And the precision of some of these strikes. There's a 200-acre compound in the heart of a congested city in Muridke in Pakistan, the Jaish-e-Mohammed compound in Bahawalpur, where our chaps were able to hit not just the compound, but a specific building within the compound known to host their headquarters. And that sort of precision must have been a bit of a shock to Pakistan. I have no doubt they'll rebuild these buildings again. I mean, how much damage can you do that can't be rebuilt in 6, 7, 9 months? But the message, nonetheless, that we hope has been conveyed. The third question was on Pakistan, India, and the Chinese factor. I think we've got to be very honest about this. There is undoubtedly a China factor. There is, first of all, the undoubted fact that China has a very big stake in Pakistan, bigger than it used to have. And that's because the single largest project in their Belt and Road Initiative worldwide is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor that runs through territory we still claim Pakistani-occupied Kashmir, all the way down to Gwadar and Baluchistan, the port in the southwest part of Pakistan. And if you realize that in the old days, goods destined for Western China had to come from the Suez Canal and the Straits of Hormuz all the way past India, around India, into the Straits of Malacca, through into the South China Sea, unload in Southeast China in Guangzhou or Shenzhen, and then go by road across the whole mainland of China to get to Western China. They are now able to save 95% of the time and 90% of the cost by simply unloading in Gwadar without doing any of this and just going up the highway into Western China directly. So China, in its own national interest, as it were, has a major stake in Pakistan. Secondly, the Pakistanis have now become far more dependent on China than they used to be. They used to balance their military dependence on both America and China. Now it's 81% of their defense equipment is Chinese. So they are significantly linked to each other, and there's no doubt our own military has announced that we were facing an integrated attack by Chinese equipment and techniques and Pakistani users, as it were. So there was what's called the Chinese kill chain, which links radar and planes and missiles and trigger mechanisms all in one seamless web, and they can therefore strike with great speed the moment they see an Indian target and so on. And this I think became very evident during these 88 hours. The fact is, our people were able to deal with it, and despite this, to penetrate these defenses and hit the 11 air bases that they did. So we came out of it all right, but we are now facing a new reality on the subcontinent. On top of that, we have our own bilateral problems with China. There have been, after many, many years of tranquility and growing trade cooperation, we've seen some belligerence since President Xi came to power. When he was visiting India in 2015, one of Mr. Modi's first visits, 14 or 15, he was actually visiting Mr. Modi in Ahmedabad when the PLA marched into territory that both armies used to patrol and stayed put, creating a crisis that rather affected the success of that visit. Subsequently, there was the Doklam incident in 2017 when the Chinese started building a road to a place that was completely uninhabited, where not a blade of grass grows, so no shepherds needed to graze there or anything. The only possible purpose of encroaching on what we consider to be Bhutanese territory, to park a Chinese presence on Doklam, is that this peninsula, this plateau, overlooks the highway that links, the narrow highway that links India, most of mainland India, to the 7 northeastern states, across Bangladesh, the narrow chicken's neck as it's called. And so the only logical reason is to be in a position to interdict that highway in the event of future military hostilities. Well, we hadn't planned on future military hostilities, but clearly some people in Beijing are. That's why they did this. The third episode was the nastiest of all. It was in May 2020, late May, early June, when they again encroached on the disputed frontier with India, again on territory that both sides used to patrol, parked themselves and started establishing durable structures. Our soldiers went, so what you're doing is supposed to withdraw, and our turn to patrol here now. And these fellows were killed. 20 Indian soldiers and officers were killed in the brawl that ensued. And that led to a major freeze in the relations between India and China for about 4.5 years, which had just begun to thaw after the 2 foreign ministers and the 2 national security advisors, 2 sets of generals met from September and October of last year, and they were able to resume joint patrolling and once again come to a modus vivendi. But that now has faced a further setback with what happened during Operation Sindoor. So I don't know the answer as to what the immediate future prospects of the triangular relationship are, but I think many in India are conscious that the Pakistan-China nexus is and represents for us a very serious factor on now both our borders, presumably at the same time. So it's a matter of some concern, as you can imagine, for a peace-loving nation that has no desire to disturb the status quo, but finds 2 neighbors that would like to disturb the status quo.
Thank you. More questions? Good Lord. Lord Seeker, yeah.
Thank you. Welcome, Shashi, and thank you for coming. My question is of a very different kind. It's about the Indian identity. I was a professor at leading universities before I arrived at the House of Lords here. I taught Indian students coming to the UK for many, many years. So my question is, why this one-way traffic? We don't see the British and the Americans going to study in India. Obviously, if people are talking about something very advanced, technical technology might make sense, but they're coming for a lot of mundane things. Now, to some extent, there is a feeling that it is Western, it must be superior. Which that poses a question, when would Indians acquire intellectual independence? Because that is the independence which really counts and gives you identity. I sense this other, referring to Edward Said's work, which you're familiar with, the notion of the other being Western is positive, and the notion of being Indian, and it still has a negative mark after all these years of independence. Why?
Thank you. Good question. Yes?
It's lovely to meet you again.
You are?
I'm Sana Kardar. We met a couple of times. I come from great-grandfather has played for British India and later became the Pakistani captain. And as British Pakistani, I have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Firstly, when the whole incident happened, the first thing Pakistan is what I have seen from mine, because I'm not having on both sides, is they pray for civilians in India. They don't want anything to happen to normal people, common people, because nobody wants them to get hurt. However, I did find some cheering. I mean, there was from Pakistani side, but I'm not denying that. There was a lot of cheering when an 8-year-old child died during one of those strikes in Pakistan. While you said it was very precise, it was one of the army officer's child. He was an 8-year-old, and I think his younger brother died as well. 2 children died, which was quite shameful considering it was, you know, terrorist things that you wanted to attack. Secondly, the gentleman here said, why don't we eradicate? Thank you for answering it in more peaceful manner that, you know, it's a nation of gun where you don't want violence. But if that is the sentiments of a common Indian and we are 2 nuclear powers, I don't think we can let peace prevail in that way. And especially given what is happening around the world, it's very important for
Thank you.
peace
Point
to
made.
prevail.
Thank you very much, and welcome to this meeting. I've got, well, good Lord. Neil, yeah.
Neil,
Go ahead, Neil.
what would you like to see parliamentarian, or what would you like to see governments around the world do to support the
No, I can't hear,
Can't
sorry.
hear you.
What would you like governments around the world to do to support the Indian government?
So what we'd like governments around the world to do to support the Indian government. And then I have just an ancillary to that written by Rajneeshji. This is your question? How do you foresee the future UK-India relations, particularly in the context of trade and security cooperation?
Right.
So,
Okay. So, Lord Singh, I have to say that you really have addressed a very important issue. As you know, I've been arguing for some years about the importance of decolonizing the Indian mind as well. That's something which I attach a lot of importance to. The truth, frankly, is that our available population of students simply doesn't have enough excellent institutions to get into. I mean, there are, let's say, a number of world-class institutions in India, the IITs, if you want to be an engineer or a technologist, some of the medical colleges, some of the liberal arts institutions, and a couple of the commercial ones, and there's some very good business schools at the graduate level. But the vast majority of Indian institutions, I think, would, in all fairness, be described at best as mediocre. The problem is, if you're an ambitious, aspiring student and you can't get into one of the best ones because you don't have the marks to qualify for the best universities, and you don't want to settle for the second best, then you will tend to look abroad in the hope that you might. It's not so much that the West is better than the best in India, but that the West may be better than the second best in India, and therefore is worth going to. So that may be partially the explanation. What troubles me indeed is that because of the extraordinary pressure on the available seats, India has reduced to some degree the number of foreign students coming in, even from developing countries. British and Americans were never very large numbers on Indian campuses. Though now there are private universities that have developed exchange programs with British and American universities, there will be some more coming. But we used to have in my time, lots of African students, for example, on our campuses, and that's gone down considerably, partially because we've been unwilling to extend seats to foreigners when there's so much demand from Indians. And undoubtedly population is a factor in this. So I think that there's, if you like, a sort of a non-intellectual answer to your intellectual quandary, but there is a practical factor here that comes in. To Ms. Kardar, I do want to say that, first of all, I'm horrified that there was any rejoicing on the death of a child. That certainly would not be the sentiment of the vast majority of Indians, I assure you. But I would say that as far as the prospects for India and Pakistan are concerned, that it's extremely important that both countries learn to live with each other. And at the moment, the willingness to do that has only been on one side. There is a discontent in Pakistan, what they keep calling the unfinished business of partition. Partition was 78 years ago now. It's over. you really ought to live with what you've got and try and make the best of it for your own people. Nobody in India begrudges Pakistan developing or prospering or whatever. The only thing we have a problem with is your choosing to, as I said in that notorious phrase, bleed India to death with 1,000 cuts. Leave us alone. I mean, we don't want to bother you, but please don't bother us. I mean, that's essentially the issue. I'm afraid that though on both sides there's a large number of ordinary citizens who get along very well with each other given the chance, and you see them, Indians and Pakistanis in Dubai or in New York or whatever, and you see that there's absolutely no problem. And as human beings, there's an enormous amount we have in common, culturally, linguistically, clothes, food, music, cinema, sport, and people would love to develop that. The problem, I'll be very honest, is the Pakistani state, which is, to paraphrase Voltaire on Prussia, in India the state has an army, in Pakistan the army has a state. And there is no army in the entire world that controls a larger share of the government's budget and a larger proportion of the country's GDP than the Pakistani army. In India, you join the army to serve and you retire, you go away, you never have any influence on policy. Whereas in Pakistan, you join the army very often to run the country, and if you're not running the country, you're running export-import, you're running petrol pumps, you're running universities and think tanks, you're controlling vast sectors. There's an entire book of this by a Pakistani scholar, who explains how the military is essentially a vast empire. And to preserve these privileges, the Pakistani military does need hostility on ideally both its borders, but at least one at a time. And this is why, unfortunately, we are facing a situation where the Pakistani military's raison d'etre is, unfortunately, to create trouble for India. And we have no choice but to react. I think it's reached a point now in Indian public opinion, while there may be people like this encouraging, wanting us to go off and finish the problem once and for all, and indeed, there was a lot of vituperation when India agreed to call off the war because they wanted India to go ahead and capture Islamabad, dismember Pakistan, God knows what else. Silly people. India has no intention of doing that. India just wanted to send a message that you cannot just walk across the border and kill people in our country with impunity. There will be a price to pay. If you don't do it, we are going to leave you alone. And that message, I think, is very clear. We've said this everywhere. That comes to the last question about the delegations going around. I mean, the fact is that we have said to everyone, we need your sympathy and understanding. Sympathy for the victims of terror, who are innocent holidaymakers, but also understanding for why we had to do what we did. We've had 37 years of experience. We've tried everything else, everything the Pakistanis have been calling for. Joint investigation, international investigation, whatever, all these things have been done, evidence has been compiled. But this, unfortunately, is a bunch of people who claim they didn't know where Osama bin Laden was till he was found in a safe house next to an army camp in a cantonment city. I mean, it's become a joke now, this question of Pakistan's mollycoddling of terrorists. I'm not suggesting that the civilian government even knew this was happening. But the fact is it doesn't matter, because there are enough people in the military who can direct this, and who don't care what the civilian government wants. In fact, when the Mumbai attacks happened in 2008, my friend, the then Foreign Minister of Pakistan, was in Delhi, Shah Mahmood Qureshi. There was a very pro-peace government that was in the process of signing, or had he come in order to sign, a liberalized visa agreement between the two countries. And that's when the terrorists, so we knew the government hadn't done it, but the fact is that if they are unable and unwilling to do anything about it, then where do we go? So the short answer, or the long answer, I've taken the one, is that if Pakistan wants to show an interest in peace, it has a very simple thing to do. It should dismantle the terror infrastructure. Everyone knows who these organizations are, where they are. There are 52 named individuals in the United Nations Terrorism Committee list who are all running amok in Pakistan, who are radicalizing people, training people, preaching hatred and murder against against Indians particularly. Arrest them, close down their bank accounts, shut their bases, confiscate their weapons. I mean, if you show you're serious about peace, India would be very happy to help in any way possible. We'd love to have a wonderful relationship with Pakistan. I mean, we've never forgotten that Muhammad Ali Jinnah, at the moment of partition, the creator of Pakistan, said he wanted India and Pakistan's relations to be like that in the US and Canada, soft open borders, and the two peoples as one, but two different political entities. We'd love to see that happen, but it's not going to happen as long as Pakistan is this kind of state and behaves in this kind of way. That's the problem we've got. Oh, sorry, what can governments do? Governments can understand, governments can empathize, governments can give us moral diplomatic support, and governments can stop mollycoddling the Pakistanis when they give safe haven to terrorists who they've been incubating. If governments can start putting pressure on Pakistan to dismantle the stereo infrastructure I just talked about, that would be a great thing governments can do around the world, especially governments on which Pakistan is dependent for aid or support or political goodwill.
All right, put your hands up. I've been signaling to people I see you, so there are so many people. Keep your hands up. Let me just see. I just want to make sure that all men, it seems to me. Oh, no, wait, okay, so gentlemen, yeah, please.
I better not make a joke about leaving your man, but it was a great honour to be here and meet you. I've heard a lot about you. As the question.
Say who you are.
Ed Vaizey, I was the culture minister under David Cameron for many years, and it was my colleague's question about universities, and then later you referenced film in terms of shared culture between Pakistan and India. I wonder if you could. I've heard, for example, that there's a huge ambition among India's museums to bring themselves up to date and improve their offering, and they're working with a lot of British museums. I just wonder whether you could reflect on the power of Indian culture as a sort of soft power. Bollywood, obviously, museums and so on, and how the UK and India can work together on this.
Okay, who else? There was a question. Yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Natasha Baird. My question is, you described Indian bureaucracy as British in origin, but uniquely Indian in execution. Would you call it our longest running fusion experiment?
Yeah, very good, Natasha. Jeff, with that.
I'm Councillor Rasan. I was a MP candidate last general election. Currently, I'm a group leader at the Reading Borough Council. My question is very quick. What is one book on diplomacy you will recommend us to read without falling asleep? What's your view on UK-India trade deal? Is it progress, genuine progress, or is it just diplomatic cricket? Speaking of cricket, what's your view of current India Test series? Do you think England ever win again, or we should send a polite letter of surrender?
Very good. Okay, so I think
We've got three, haven't we?
we've got three.
Now, let me start all over again. Lord Vaizey was the first. Soft power is something that I think I can claim credit to be the first person to raise this issue in India of the soft power of India, and I was invited thereafter to talk about it, not because I had been a friend of Joseph Nye, the man who originated the concept in America, who not applied it to India, only to the US. And I thought that the idea could be extended to India, and bounced some ideas off him, and he encouraged me to go further. And you're quite right. I mean, Bollywood, yoga, Indian fashion, Indian cuisine, the omnipresence of Indian restaurants, all of these things are part of India's soft power. What can Britain do? I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned museums in your list, because of course, your museums are full of purloined Indian goods. While David Cameron, your former boss, directly said when he was asked about whether Britain might want to return the Kohinoor from the Queen's crown, he said, I'm afraid we'll have to stay put, because if we give it back, the British Museum will soon be empty. It was a nice throwaway line, but it's probably true as well. Let me stress that the very least one thing that Britain could do is actually collaborate with Indian museums. There could be traveling exhibitions. I mean, you don't have to give them back, but you can loan them for a while so people can come and see some of the things. They don't have to buy a ticket to London to come and see. That would be one thing you could do. You could also help some of the Indian museums to upgrade and improve their quality. The 20th century is now already past, and there are a lot of techniques that could be vastly improved. I'm sure you, because you are the world capital of museums in many ways, you probably know how to do it. You can impart some of this transfer of technology as well could help. So I'm all in favor of Britain playing a role in buttressing India's soft power. And one thing you could do at home is to set up a museum to colonialism. I would urge you to be able, I mean, it's very striking now that, you know, the Germans, for example, after World War II, were in denial for about 25 years. I went to Dhaka in 1980, and literally, there was no sign, there was nothing, there was no tourist organization. You had to go and ask how to get there. But when you got there, they politely showed you around, but that was it. And subsequently, however, they now regularly conduct tours for the later generations of young Germans to remind them of the atrocities committed by their ancestors and to warn them why this should never be allowed to happen again. I'm not sure how well that's done, given that a neo-fascist party is now on the rise in Germany, but the message very clearly is we have to own up to the past. We have to be aware of it. No one is asking any Briton living today to be in any way guilty of any of the atrocities that were undoubtedly committed in the past. But at least to be able to educate students about, you can do A-levels in history in England today without learning a single line of colonial history. I mean, it just seems amazing that the only museum with the word imperial in its title is the Imperial War Museum, which celebrates victories of the British over foreign peoples. I think that might be one thing that you could also contribute to, a greater awareness, as it were, on both sides of what the colonial experience was really all about, particularly from the point of view of the victims as well. The second question, remind me, Krish.
One on diplomacy.
Oh yes, no, yours was the second question. It was about
Indian bureaucracy. So
bureaucracy, yes. I actually wrote in my book, The Great Indian Novel, way back in 1989, that British colonialism rested on the conviction that anything resulting from the filling of forms in quadruplicate couldn't possibly be oppression. And so they instilled all this bureaucracy into India. Unfortunately, the British were wise enough to abandon all these practices back home. But in India, we are still filling in forms in quadruplicate. And every little decision requires multiple levels of clearance, as in the British era, and multiple opportunities for rent seeking as well, and so on and so forth. So yes, I'm not a fan of Indian bureaucracy. Given half a chance, I would massively take an axe to the needless regulations we have built up since the British era and added to since, and thereby reduce the opportunities for bureaucrats to obstruct progress, which unfortunately is something that does happen a lot. I mean, I don't want to tarnish the entire club, so that there are some good, visionary, intelligent, well-minded, well-meaning bureaucrats. But you're right, the systems that were created, frankly, to serve the purposes of colonial oppression, have continued, sadly, and now become bureaucratic oppression of the same Indians. So it really hasn't been a worthwhile legacy. Yeah, I'm afraid it's the longest lasting British gift to us that I'm not terribly happy to celebrate. And diplomacy. I'm going to be a very immodest author and recommend two of my books. There hasn't been anything quite like this. There's a book called Pax Indica, which I published in 2012. So a lot of the numbers are out of date, or trade figures and so on. But the basic analysis, I'm sorry to say, remains still very sound. On India, Pakistan, India, China, India, soft power, all of these things I've written about in some length. It's Pax Indica, India and the world of the 21st century, from the point of view of a lay reader. I mean, it's not a scholarly work, but I hope you'll enjoy that. And then another one I co-wrote with the president of the Observer Research Foundation is The New World Disorder and the Indian Imperative. That was about the way the world has become. It was published just as COVID was beginning, so it more or less sank without trace, but it's around. Get it off Amazon, and you might find it a worthwhile read. But I mean, there's a lot of people. The present foreign minister has written a book called Why Bharat Matters, which is his case for India's place in the world. And that might interest you as well. So there's more and more people waking up to some of these issues now. I think that was it.
So we've got, they're coming, some of your questions fast and furious, and this filtering process here is a challenging one. But let me ask, there were a number of questions on Shashi Ji himself potentially joining the BJP or something like that. Does anyone want to articulate that question? There wasn't just one question, a number of them. So let's just see.
My name is Shaman Raja. I just want to congratulate you first of all for trending and leading the polls for becoming the CEO of Kerala. Should that happen, how would you encourage better ties in trade with the United Kingdom?
So how would you, so if the Kerala...
The right trend is to become the CM of Kerala, it seems.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And if that was to happen, how would you encourage better trade relationships with the United Kingdom?
Okay, so that's not the question I was fishing for.
Don't fish, Krish.
No, I'm just being a good moderator. The question was, would you ever join the BJP? That's one of the questions. Whoever asked that question didn't quite articulate it. That's okay. And then the other one here is, this is good. Is it Mihika, age 21? Do you want to ask the question? Go on.
You have to be really loud.
Yeah, no.
Hi, I'm Genika, recent law graduate. So my question to you is about what your opinions are on the calls for a separate Punjabi state.
Separate Punjabi state.
Yeah. So I attended grammar school in South, so it was quite polarizing. We were kind of even split of half Hindu, half Muslim students. So it was really interesting kind of growing up and debating everyone and seeing everyone's opinions on it.
Thank you.
But there were debates
Got it. And he's read the question as
Yeah.
well.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
right.
Two questions. Yeah.
Well,
Three questions, sorry, yeah.
yeah, so I'm not losing track. I got the question about Kerala.
Then
got the question about Punjab.
And then, are you tempted to join the BJP?
Oh, I see. I'll dispose of that. The answer is no. I mean, I have made it amply clear over many, many years what my beliefs and values are. I came into politics rather late in life, given how long a paper trail I have. I published my first book in 1981. So I've had, 44 years to make my views about India and the world fairly well known. And I think, in all fairness, whatever else you might say about me, I've been fairly consistent. And while I do respect a lot of things that the BJP government has done, particularly on issues of economic development, technology, the new tech stack, and so on, the national security policy, and some aspects of our foreign relations which have been very well conducted. Having said all of that, there still are some fundamental disagreements, particularly about matters relating to Indian identity. Lord Speaker, the question of what is the idea of India? I see it as a large civilization anchored very much, of course, in the ancient past, but subsequently subject to various influences of various groups, various religions, various languages, various ethnicities, who've all come together and contributed to what Nehru described as a palimpsest. Whereas the BJP rests on an ideological premise that India is essentially a sort of pure Hindu state, and that everybody else is either an intruder or an interloper or a guest, and I don't see them that way. So that's one of the major differences. I think they're beginning to mellow a little bit on some of these things, and perhaps there could be room for constructive conversation, but at the moment I don't see common ground on some of these fundamental issues. And so to my mind, what I've done in recent months, which led to this renewed speculation, was to stand up for my country and my country's interests. And when I first became chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee back in 2014, I actually said that I don't believe there's such a thing as a Congress foreign policy and a BJP foreign policy. There's only Indian foreign policy and Indian national interests, and that's what I'm here to serve. And that remains my view, and I will continue acting on that basis, even though, of course, the partisan divide has become much more bitter within India. And many in my own party don't particularly welcome my approach. I've stuck to my guns so far, and I intend to continue to do so. On the question of Punjab, I mean, we're sort of revisiting old history when it comes to these discussions that took place around the partition of India in 47, 48, and it was unanimously agreed that there was no viable alternative but two states at that point. And the Sikh leadership was very actively involved in these discussions. So that Baldev Singh, Master Tharoor Singh, many others, and they went ahead with the idea of staying within a united, multi-religious India. And that worked very well until there was, in fact, at one point there was even a demand to break up the state of Punjab, which was roughly equal Hindus and Sikhs, to create a Sikh majority state within India. And that was done. So Punjab, as was in the early 60s, became three states: Punjab, Haryana, and Himachal Pradesh in the hills. And so what remained of Punjab is a Sikh majority state already. And that's Indian Punjab. Don't forget that the old Sikh capital was Lahore, which is now in Pakistani Punjab. So if you start recreating the old Sikh fantasies, I'm afraid you'll have some issues with the Pakistanis if you want to take over their big city. So my own view about all of this is that, frankly, there really is no traction for this. And frankly, within Indian Punjab, and I have zillions of Sikh friends, there is zero traction for this idea. It's an entirely diaspora phenomenon. And it's been triggered off, of course, by the most unfortunate period of 82 to 84, when a Sikh Khalistani group under Daniel Singh Bindangwale started assassinating people and led to a very strong army crackdown, which ended up with his killing and the deaths of others who happened to be caught in the crossfire. And the wounds of that took a while to heal, particularly because in 84, the Prime Minister who had done that was assassinated by her Sikh bodyguards, whom she had refused to transfer out, saying, I don't see people's religion, they're my bodyguards and they will stay, and they turned their guns on her. And that did result in a nasty series of riots in some cities of North India for some little while. But all of that then healed rapidly. The important thing is that what remained of the Khalistani movement was effectively suppressed by the Sikh majority state under a Sikh chief minister and with a Sikh chief of police. So it was essentially Sikh policemen restoring law and order against unruly Khalistani elements throughout the 1980s. And by the 90s, normalcy and peace have descended. Today, it's all a bad dream, and there is literally no serious Khalistani movement of any sort. I mean, I'm not even talking 1% of the Sikh population of Indian Punjab would have any sympathy for this. We've had a Sikh Prime Minister in India, we've had Sikh Army chiefs, we've had Sikh Air Force chiefs. I mean, there's simply nothing that Sikhs have felt disempowered from doing in India. And I don't think that the majority of Indians have any of the lingering resentments of 82 to 84. That's history now, that's 40 plus years ago, and people aren't thinking about that. Yes, there will be some Sikhs who have been wounded, who have had people killed in the riots and so on, who will bear that pain, understandably. But they're not going around sort of supporting violent means. They've seen the damage violence can do, and they don't want it. So I've tried to write about this in some sympathy in my novel Riots, which I would be, again, modest enough to commend to you, because I tried to articulate the voice of a Sikh police officer caught up in all this. But anyway, cut long story short, the short answer is there is no case anymore. India has become very much more integrated today than it was in 1947, and that sense of national unity is very, very strong. I come from the constituency of Thiruvananthapuram in Kerala, which is literally the farthest you can fly from Delhi without falling into the water. And there I was present at the consecration of a new Sikh Gurudwara, where I helped lay one of the sacred bricks. And for me, it was a moment of great pride. This is, I mean, India coming together in every way, in every part of the country. And I think that, honestly, you can conduct public opinion polls or whatever else. There's unfortunately an element in the diaspora which has been attracted by the allure of these fantasies. They might want to try and create it in, I don't know, the backyards of Vancouver, but they certainly are not going to get a chance to create it in India.
And then the Kerala point.
The Kerala point. Yes, I mean, I haven't, as you know, I've been a member of the National Parliament. I have not been involved in Kerala politics at all. There have been a number of polls over the last couple of years that show me, for some reason, as the public's favoured choice for the top job in Kerala. But my party has a very traditional approach that it does not name a chief ministerial face for any state election, except when there is an incumbent. And I don't expect them to deviate from that policy. So I think the question to that degree is somewhat academic. I'm certainly willing to take an active role in Kerala as required. In fact, in the last Kerala Assembly elections, I was asked to chair the manifesto committee of the UDF, the coalition led by the Congress, and I did so, helped draft a manifesto I'm still rather proud of. I might add to it today, given the doldrums the state economy is finding itself in. And there would be some changes that I'd very much like to make to improve ease of doing business, slashing bureaucracy, as we talked about, a number of things like that. And Kerala has many, many good things going for it, and many self-imposed handicaps that need to be removed. Very happy to play my part in whatever way it becomes feasible politically.
Okay, we're in the last round of questions, so yes, please.
If colonialism were
Introduce yourself.
Nikita Beg, I'm one of the co-founders of the 1928 Institute. If colonialism were a Shakespearean character, who would it be? And would you give them a redemption arc? Would you give them a redemption arc?
Redemption. Okay, very good. Sorry, Lord Sohoto, there are a number of people
Yeah, that's
wanting
okay.
but this is my dear friend on the bench, Lord Sohoto. So yes, gentleman, a very persistent young man back there. Yeah, I don't look behind you. Sorry. Yeah.
Hello, Dr. Tharoor. My name is Dev Sharma. I'm a member of the UK Youth Parliament and I'm a student at the University of Cambridge studying politics. I've seen my generation become increasingly disillusioned with politics in an age of 60-second reels and 280-character politics. It's hard to get complex ideas to cut through the noise. What do politicians like you need to do to get young people engaged and passionate about issues?
Right. Good point. Thank you so much. And one more, please.
Hi, I'm Karishma Palmer. The Indian government is rooted in nationalist identity. It's propagating its Hindu identity. What place do you think there is in future India for those who aren't Hindu, so those of other religions and of no religion?
Yeah. Okay, so first question, Nikita, was about why am I having so many senior moments? Was about colonialism being a Shakespearean character. Caliban, I think, from The Tempest, an absolute monster. And I think it's something that honestly I don't think, because as Caliban had his moments and his moments of humanity and weakness, so did colonialism. There were some decent things done. But basically, it was monstrous from the point of view of those who experienced colonial rule because of all that it did in terms of violence, cruelty, massacre of civilians, the governing of a country for the benefit of those doing the governing rather than those who were being governed, the loot and drainage of resources, all of these things were monstrous. So that, I think, is probably the answer I'd give you. On social media politics and the dwindling attention span levels of interest of youth, I assume you meant about England. It's largely true around the world, but in India, we still have a fair amount of passionate young people getting excited about political issues, including on and through social media. So if you ask me what I would do, I do try, and I'm surrounded by young people in my staff, and I try and follow their advice and do things on social media. Some of it fairly serious, and some of it fairly trivial, but does capture eyeballs. So, knocking about a cricket ball before India played the T20 Cup final, whatever, I got billions. So some of those things also happen. But the idea is, politics is now, unfortunately, being rendered somewhat superficial in the process. I came into politics cherishing ideas with a vision of a better society for my country, wanting to guide my country towards certain kinds of changes, a certain place in the world internationally, but also certain changes domestically. And I find a lot of it now is more about politicians branding and sort of, one issue kind of things, which to my mind, I think have rendered, sadly, a lot of politics as popularly consumed somewhat trivial. And that is a pity. It's a pity for you, it's a pity in my country, it's a pity pretty much wherever it's practiced, it's a pity in the US as we are seeing. But I don't know what the answer is, because democracy will mean that politicians must cater to the tastes of the demos, of the people. And if this is what the people want, this is what the politicians will give them. But it is worrying, because ideas are no longer as much at stake, and long-term vision is largely absent. I mean, politicians, by and large, in democracies, don't think beyond the next election. They may not be around to do anything about what they're thinking about. But on top of that, if the voter isn't thinking beyond 90 seconds, then you've got a double challenge. And Karishma, your question was about
I guess
other faiths.
Other faiths and so on. Yeah. So this is where I've been writing about this and articulating my views for quite some time. So I will say that to my mind, this is fundamental to the survival and success of India. That every Indian must feel a stake, and an equal stake in India's success and development and growth. We're not a country like Pakistan, which stamps non-Muslim on the passports of its non-Muslim citizens. We don't do that, we never will be. And certainly I would resist any such move to classify non-Hindus as somehow different from Hindus. An 80% majority does not entitle, I think, Hindus to dismiss the invaluable contributions of people of other faiths. I have made speeches. I've been to, for example, the memorial in the island of Diu, the one ship we lost to the war with Pakistan in 71. It's commanded by Captain Mullah. And if you read the names of the people who went down on that ship, the soldiers, the sailors, you will find every religion, every part of India, every linguistic group practically represented. Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus, Christians, the northeast, the southwest, the north, and the captain himself is a Kashmiri. That is India, and nobody can tell any of these people that their sacrifice for India is worth something less than any sacrifice a Hindu might have made for India. So to my mind, all Indians are equal and must always be equal, and our constitution guarantees it. When you worry about Hindu nationalism, I draw a distinction between sort of a belligerent nationalism that disparages other communities, and there are some elements in the ruling ecosystem that behave that way, and a nationalism that merely wants to assert pride in the nation and cultural pride, which to my mind is fine. I've written a book in India called The Battle of Belonging. There's a slightly abridged version here called The Struggle for India's Soul in the UK, where I make this point about patriotism and nationalism. Patriotism, to my mind, is a natural emotion. It's like loving your mother, not because she's the most beautiful, not because she's the most accomplished, the most intelligent, the richest, but because she's yours. You belong to her, she belongs to you. That's what loving your country is all about. It's not because you think it is better, greater, richer, smarter than anybody else. It's just yours. That's patriotism. Nationalism is very often about belligerence. It's about asserting your superiority over others. It needn't be, but it can be. And if it were to be that, it's not a desirable thing. So to my mind, I mean, the distinction I do in that book, as I said, a nationalist, a patriot is prepared to die for his country, a nationalist is prepared to kill for his state. And that is a difference that we have to be conscious of. To my mind, the latter should not have any real place in the India of Mahatma Gandhi. The former is entirely right. And so as a patriot, if a terrorist comes and attacks me from a foreign country, I will want to resist. I'm not going to take that lying down. But I would never support the initiation of a war or the extension of my country's territory by conquest or whatever, because I don't think that's what we should be all about. That's the distinction that I would draw. And similarly, domestically, I believe that the former idea of patriotism is one that everyone of every language group, every religious group, every state part of India can subscribe to, because it's their country. I mean, take Christians, for example. We have Christians in India who've been Christian longer than anybody living in England has ever been Christian in terms of their heritage, going back to St. Thomas the Apostle, who converted people in the first decades of the Christian era. So, I mean, it's absurd to suggest that they are somehow less entitled to a state than any Hindu who might trace their descent to the same period. And as far as all religions are concerned, religion is about the way you worship the divine. But your country is about other things. I make the case for what we call civic nationalism. There is a nationalism that doesn't inhere in your identity, your religion, your linguistic group, whatever, or your ethnicity, but rests on institutions, on a constitution above all, and institutions under that constitution that apply equally to all. And India rests on a civic nationalism. Our constitution rests on the premise that everybody's equal. And while there have been debates about whether the word secular should have been added to the constitution and so on, even if you take it out, it's a secular constitution. We have the right of worship, we have the right of assembly, we have the right of propagation of your religion to others. You can do all of that. So in what way does the constitution in any way put one religion above anyone else? So as long as we remain faithful to our constitution, the answer to your question is we're safe. All Indians can march together proudly forward as one.
And the last question, which is in front of me here, what can the diaspora do to further support of the UK-India relations?
Gosh, I see 90% of you, I think, seem to be from the diaspora. So wonderful. Continue caring. Continue being involved. Come and visit. See what's going on. So that your criticisms and suggestions are well-founded in experience and knowledge. Maintain links. Welcome the likes of me when we come here and tell us what you think and so on. I don't think it's my place to preach to you what you can do, because ultimately your allegiance must be to your own country, the country in which you're living. But I think, you know, as Indians, and I often joke that you can take the Indian out of India, but you can't take India out of the Indian. And so even if you're here and have made your future here, there's always going to be some of India in your heart and soul, and I hope that you will thereby want to contribute to its betterment and take pride in its accomplishments, including in cricket. I didn't answer your question, sir. I think the Lord's Test is going to be extremely, extremely exciting, because we've seen both teams fairly well balanced after the first two Test matches, and I'm sure that they're going to give us a much spicier pitch at Lord's with Jofra Archer hurling down the thunderbolts. But we have Bumrah to offer in return, and I think our batting has rather distinguished itself. So hopefully it's going to be a very, very exciting match, and I think India is likely to come ahead in this thing. Fingers crossed. Favorite test. Oh yeah. All right. So we have a good majority backing England. Doesn't matter. Yes, I did. I'm so sorry. Yes, R.I.P.
Anyway, we will. No. We move on. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, this has been an absolute privilege to have you in our midst, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience. So many questions have gone on. Isn't it extraordinary? I mean, you know, you've been addressing people with this concentration, this intensity, again and again and again, you know, every day. You say, well, I'm on a busman's holiday. Well, unlike any busman I know. Thank you so much. Thank you. Shashi, please come again. Dr. Nikita Ved, do you want to talk about something else? Please, go ahead.
So first of all, thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate you taking the time to come here. We really appreciate Dr. Tharoor's time as well. I know it's been a hot day and a long day. I won't keep you for too much longer. So a little bit about us, the 1928 Institute. We are a think tank, a British Indian think tank. We are a spin out from the University of Oxford, led by Oxford academics like myself. The thing I'd like to talk to you about today is our upcoming research project, the British Indian Census. This is our flagship project. This is the second time we've run it. Our aim is to collect as much information as you're willing to give us, within the realms of GDPR, of course. We ask questions about your policy priorities, the areas that matter to you. Have you experienced racism and more? And we plan to write these up, write up recommendations, and give these white papers to our lovely parliamentarian friends here and advocate on the behalf of yourselves. The only way we can do that is if you take part. So please, if you could scan this QR code, does the QR code work? Well, we'll find out. Maybe the QR code works, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't work, please, there are two other ways you can take our census. One way. On our website underneath Research and Impact, you'll find a link there. It takes only 5 minutes to do. The second way is if you all use social media. We're on Instagram. Look in the link in our bio. You'll find it there as well. It's really important that you have your say within these corridors of power. Thank you.